preacher and a committed member of her church.
There is no other people group on the face of the planet who has experienced the kind of suffering that is akin to the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ like Black and brown people.
God, I love this game.
No other group.
Since she is well aware of what's happening in the world, I wanted to hear her reasons for keeping the faith. But I also spoke to Dr. Anthony B. Penn.
Well, my birth name is Anthony Bernard Penn, but most folks over the course of my life called me Tony.
He's a religious scholar, former pastor just like me, and now an atheist. And I think his perspective is important in this conversation.
Where is the historical evidence to support the claim that God is on the side of the oppressed? Right? What is the historical evidence that suggests God is on the side of Black folks in North America working on their behalf? Because every moment of progress has been countered.
And if you stick around at the end, I'll share how I'm thinking about my faith today. So let's dig in. I first encountered Dr. Penn's work when I was in seminary. I couldn't find the exact article that I read way back when, but it essentially argued that there is no God. But if there was a God, he clearly hated Black people.
Does God hate Black people? I mean, I think that's an important question, a question that too many Black theists have ignored. Right? If you look at our experience, it is overwhelmingly tied to suffering. And true, all folks suffer, but this is disproportionate and unto death. And it ought to force us to raise the question, if God is loving, kind, just, and compassionate, and concerned with folks and can make stuff happen, and Black folks still suffer disproportionately, then maybe that God doesn't like Black people. Because white folks in general, right, as a group, seem to be doing all right. Black folks as a whole, not doing so well. And forget about the kind of misery that Black women face. Or Black trans folks. Forget about that kind of misery. Just in general, there is an overwhelming experience of misery. And again, if God is loving, kind, just, compassionate, concerned with folks and can make stuff happen, and Black folks are disproportionately suffering, then maybe God doesn't like Black folks. It's a question that's got to be wrestled with. And Black Christians in particular haven't wrestled with it because they read the Bible assuming they are the favored community. Right? They are the equivalent of the children of Israel. But if you look at our experience in the context of North America, you can make a reasonable argument, perhaps a more reasonable argument, that we are the Canaanites, the Moabites, the Hittites, the folks who get a whooping. Right, so it seems to me that is a question that is central, that has to be wrestled with, but Black theists have ignored it.
On the other hand, Christians like Claudia would argue that Dr. Penn is wrong and that the life of Jesus is proof that he is wrong.
The reason I would say there is a case for Christ as Black, as resin, and not necessarily racially, gotta be clear, not necessarily racially Black, but experientially Black. And that case is that this God put on human flesh, and when he was born in the midst of a genocide, flees to Egypt with his parents as a refugee seeking asylum, to then grow up in a working class community of Nazareth, Black and brown people who were had no socioeconomic wealth or political position or station. And this brown man who hid in Egypt literally goes about the Gaza Strip teaching brown people.
This character, this villain is my favorite. He just revealed his plan. It's to kill everyone who speaks English. And he's like, man will breathe free again. I don't want to stop him.
The sick. And then because he did all of those things, he is falsely accused and he's arrested in the middle of the night. And we just got out of Easter weekend, right? They take him, all right? And he's literally, before the Sanhedrin, they are desperately trying to pin him for a crime he did not commit. He dies in the middle of two criminals with the greatest, grossest execution known to human history. There is no other people group on the face of the planet who has experienced the kind of suffering that is akin to the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ like Black and brown people. No other group in human history. And what is fascinating about that to me, Garrison, is that Black and brown people make up 80% of humanity on the globe. A very small minority group is currently experiencing global power. And their lived experience is not that of a crucified Savior. It is that of a Roman and religious power. That is why we can say, like James Cone, that Jesus was Black.
I grew up in the West End of Atlanta, which means that for as long as I can remember, I've heard Hebrew Israelites and 5%ers and folks in the Nation of Islam describe Christianity as the white man's religion. This idea that Black Christians were essentially worshiping the God of their oppressor. And Claudia had something to say about the history of Christianity in Black or African possession.
I think everyone knows that Ethiopia has always been a Christian nation. But Ethiopia also was at this really important intersection of international trade. We get Ethiopia as this Christian nation because they had constant contact with the direct disciples of Jesus Christ who were eyewitnesses to his life, death, and resurrection. But then even outside of Ethiopia, even if we go to Ghana with the Akan people, who also had their own creation narrative that is very similar to the creation narrative of the Hebrew scriptures, where they even named the creator God, the God of Saturday. Right. So there has always been this very present belief in the Judeo-Christian God on the continent far prior to the Portuguese first coming to take slaves in 1471.
And while Christianity has been an incredibly powerful and positive force in the Black community, nurturing our most progressive and effective voices, it's impossible to ignore the most regressive elements present in the faith.
Well, from very early on, Black church figures tried to publicly reimagine the position of Black folks within the context of the United States, yeah? So one of my favorites is Henry McNeil Turner. Henry McNeil Turner in the late 1800s in Atlanta, Georgia, argued that God is a Negro. Pause. 1800s, Atlanta, Georgia, God is a Negro. He also argued that the flag of the United States is a dirty rag and will remain so until Black folks are treated properly. So you get these sorts of figures who are moving between the church and political life, right? He holds several appointments. Other ministers are moving into political office, and then you move through the decades and you get someone like Adam Clayton Powell Jr., right? So you get churches that are sure enough involved in the political process. And this was fruitful, one, because these churches were economically independent. Like you. So these ministers, by and large, could work for the well-being of Black folks without worrying about paychecks. The Black church was the first organization for and by Black folks. So the church becomes an easy mechanism Black folks could use to be involved. It gave them a theology that included them. They were made in the image of God. Yes, that Black folks had deep importance and significance, and provided them with opportunities to live that in public, both as individuals and as a collective. So the Black church has played that sort of role, but the Black church has played that role almost exclusively in relationship to race. So it hasn't dealt well with issues of gender and sexism. Forget about its ability to deal with sexuality. What happens to a trans population within black churches, right? So they worked hard to try to get race right, but we are not one-dimensional beings, right? We are not beings who are simply defined by anti-blackness in terms of race. There are a variety of ways in which this society has tried to marginalize, if not kill us, and black churches have been reluctant to address that. I think one of the shortcomings of black churches, why they have not been willing to engage a much more expansive agenda, is because of respectability politics. If we look like white folks, if we sound like white folks, if we structure our individual and collective lives in ways that mimic white folks, they will have to appreciate us. So we've reached a point again where black churches, the dominance of black churches is being consistently challenged by pointing out its shortcomings. And we also have new vocabulary, new grammar, new ways of naming our positions in the world that are enhanced and spread so very effectively through social media. So black folks know their options. They know I'm a secular humanist and I'm not alone.
Why is that? Why are more black people identifying as atheist today? Why is that happening?
Why are more black folks identifying as atheists today? I think what is happening is a greater degree of comfort with naming what they have been. Right? Black atheists and secular humanists didn't just pop on the scene recently. We have existed, but we've reached a moment in history in which the dominance of the black church is being legitimately challenged, right? Legitimately challenged. And this has been more graphic over the past 3 decades with the spiritual but not religious, right? Or those who claim no particular religious affiliation. The percentage of black folks who move in one of those 2 directions is noteworthy. The dominance of the black church has been fractured. In more recent years, I think some of that is a result of the ways in which Black Lives Matters, for example, has given us opportunity to rethink our engagement with the world and to rethink our meaning-making processes and to think Black life in ways.
I don't think so, Lonnie, but I think you mentioned something about that to me.
It's also the case that if you think in terms of hip hop, a major influence within the context of the United States, there has been a softening, a signifying, a rethinking of these dominant theistic themes. So Tupac is Black Jesus, the patron saint of thugs. Or on Crown, Jay-Z says you're in the presence of a king, scratch that, you're in the presence of a god. Or Kanye West says, I am a god. Right? So you get this kind of rethinking that has been in place for a while. Because the 5%ers, for example, argue we're getting this all wrong because the black man is God. This is where the Nation of Islam falls short for them. Nation of Islam says you're created in the image of Allah. 5%ers say, no, we are gods, right? So there has been a softening, a reworking, a rethinking of these categories for a good stretch of time.
Okay, so confession time. I'm a Christian. You're probably not surprised by that. But I will say that I've gone through a kind of deconstruction. I don't like that term. I think it's a bit overused. But these, for me, are shifts and evolutions in my faith that often leave me feeling uncomfortable with all of the assumptions and baggage present in calling myself a Christian. Most of that discomfort is because of the way Christians have chosen to represent themselves in politics over the last 20 to 30 years. Christian nationalism is a mind virus. It is a cancer in the church.
To be fair, I was also paying half attention to that and half attention to Metal Gear.
I have 3 reasons. First, Christianity
Coffee would be more reliable.
Eastern, or more accurately, a Near Eastern religion, which means it should be rightly understood within an Eastern framework. For me, in order to give Christianity a fair shake, I have to understand it separately from the bastardized version we know today. I'll come back to that in my third point. The cultural context of the Bible's authors and main characters would not align with the money-hungry, capitalistic structures we know today. This means that success in the biblical narrative exists almost exclusively outside of the confines of worldly possession or wealth accumulation. Our top-down preconception about who is favored and who isn't simply do not fit within the framework of the biblical narrative. In fact, the ultimate main character of the book, Jesus, was a Middle Eastern Jewish man who was born in a barn, lived as a nomad, owned no earthly possessions, believed in sweeping debt forgiveness, and constantly criticized the exploitative practices of businessmen, church grifters, and oppressive governments. Second, and this is connected, I've read the book. Slave owners frequently cut out critical parts of the biblical narrative to stop Black people from learning the whole story. Books like the Exodus were removed from slave Bibles because those stories were too radicalizing for the enslaved to have access to. This is one of the great ironies of the anti-Black book bans taking place across the country. They're acting just like their grandfathers who thought they could ban radicalizing books from the Bible. Slave preachers were brought onto plantations to preach about how the Bible commands the enslaved to obey their masters. That's Ephesians chapter 6. But they were not allowed to preach verses in the book just before, Galatians chapter 3, which says that the slave and the free are made equals in Christ Jesus. When you read the book, the whole book, it is clear that God is squarely on the side of the oppressed and decidedly against the oppressor, even when the oppressors are his people. More on that in a bit. I've read the New Testament, like the book of Luke, where Jesus says that his singular mission is to bring liberation to the oppressed. Jesus goes on to present a powerfully progressive vision of something close to universal health care.
This is what white people think Jesus looked like.
A kind of criminal justice reform. The third reason why I still identify as a Christian is a bit more logical and directly connected to reading the book. The Bible presents a narrative of people.
Yeah, it's basically what the whole video is about, Lonnie.
In direct opposition to what the God of Scripture tells them to do. One could argue that one of the central themes of the Bible is choice and how the divine is navigating people's freedom to choose. From Adam and Eve choosing to eat the forbidden fruit of the garden, to David choosing to step up and fight Goliath, to some people choosing to accept or reject Jesus as the Messiah. Choice is woven throughout the text, and what comes with that choice is a great deal of risk. Human error, exploitation, and wrongdoing are often the fruit of that risk. This is, for me, where faith has its limits, because we all have choices to make. If I choose to harm someone, it doesn't matter how many Bible verses I quote, I will be responsible for my actions. It would be silly for me to place the blame for my actions on God. Similarly, hundreds of years of Europe and the West's nonstop colonial exploitation of African people and land is a choice that has produced far-reaching outcomes to this day. I would challenge you to go back and read the writings of white people living in what would become America in the 1600s and the 1700s. They knew what they were doing. America's enslavement, segregation, mass incarceration, and continued exclusion of Black people is a choice. And if God exists, I don't think it's fair to blame that on them. Anti-Blackness is real, and it isn't of God's making. The Bible basically describes Jesus as a Black person.
In the Bible, is Jesus, is his appearance?
It's like basically what my grandparents always say, prosperity gospel shit.
And hair was, yeah. His feet was black as brass and his hair was that of wool. James Harden? James Harden? LeBron? You, what?
In some ways, I think this is why Black people are still Christians. The Bible promises a better tomorrow despite the trials of today. And you may scoff at the therapeutic nature of that claim, and I get it. But there's also something powerful about hope. And the Black church, despite all of its flaws, has harnessed that hope, producing art, expression, and movements that have changed the world. Okay, that's it for this one. Thank you for watching and subscribing. I think about faith a lot in real life, but I actually rarely explore those thoughts in my content. So in some ways, this is kind of an experiment. And if you watched to this point, you now know about my little experiment. I'll be checking out the likes and the comments on this video to get a sense of how you're feeling about it. So subscribe, drop a like. And I have to tell you, this isn't a transactional community. We talk, we argue, we disagree. So get into the comments. I'm reading every single one. Would love to know what you're thinking. As always, I'm grateful that you're here, my friends. Peace.
I was one of the poorer students at a rich school. Some of you will know how that feels. It was an art school, and students were expected to give huge chunks of cash at the drop of a hat. I was always the one who had to borrow materials from other students, or buy them secondhand, or beg to be allowed to use cheap knockoff brands. I felt so privileged to have gotten access to such a rich sphere, but at the same time, I was always aware that I was an outsider. I remember the day a professor straight up told our class, "Poor people don't go here." At one point, I called my friend Mel to vent, and he passed on some wisdom from a guest speaker. He told me, "Rab, these places aren't made for people like us. Our job is to get in, steal what we can, and get out. We're scavengers." Pixar's Ratatouille is about a lot of things. Inspiration, talent, art, memory, and capitalism. Or class mobility within a capitalist system. It's a story of extremes, with the poorest of the poor, those who have to dumpster dive for their food, on one end of the spectrum, and the wealthy, those who can afford to dine on haute cuisine, a symbol of the elite, on the other. Ratatouille tells the rags to riches tale of an artist from here who attempts to get to there. Once you look at the rats as the poor, or how the rich see the poor, a whole new layer of the story opens up. So let's start back at the cottage and work our way through the film. If you have money, you can afford to put aside work and chores and the rest of life's messes long enough to practice your craft. The less money you have, the less time you have for such frivolous activities. Survival comes above all else. Material costs are also a problem. You can get by for a while on leftovers and substitutes, but at some point you'll hit a wall where to progress as a cook you'll need to experiment with more expensive foods and kitchenware. And then where are you going to get that money? We see Remy struggle with all of this when we meet him at the start of the film. To survive, he and his family have had to live off the land and other people's garbage. Remy's dad has learned to focus only on survival. So as far as he's concerned, Remy's gifts are a waste of time.
So, you can smell ingredients. So what?
He only starts to care about Remy's passions when they become applicable to their survival. Remy, of course, wants to pursue his passion. He yearns after the humans, the rich, and their ability to create.
I know I'm supposed to hate humans, but there's something about them. They don't just survive, they discover, they create.
And so Remy makes do with what he has at his disposal. He repurposes the materials around him to create kitchenware.
I love that, Lonnie.
A combination of other people's trash and whatever
We
food
need more
he can afford
prezzies.
in the backyard. And he gets by on that for a while. But here comes the moment where he realizes he's hit a wall. He can settle for good, but to really make this dish, he has to cross a boundary.
A little saffron would make this!
Saffron. Why do I get the feeling
It's in the kitchen.
And so Remy trespasses onto human territory. Remy says he's been to the kitchen a million times, but this time he's reached too far past his station, and the film punishes him for that transgression. In the chaos of the clan's evacuation, Remy loses both his home and his family. It's not all bad, though. If Remy had never tried to steal the saffron, the clan never would have left for the sewers, and Remy would have never emerged to find...
Paris? All this time, I've been underneath Paris?
At the time of Ratatouille's release, Paris was the 15th most expensive place to live on the planet. This year, the Economist Intelligence Unit ranked it the most expensive place, period, tied with Zurich and Hong Kong. In either year, Remy shot for the moon and landed amongst the stars, as they say. He finds himself at his favorite chef's kitchen, where he sees Pasta Boy ruin a pot of soup. And here's where I want to talk about Linguini. In some ways, he's a lot like Remy. Who else has no social status? Who else has a job that revolves around garbage?
How dare you hire someone without my permission?
We needed a garbage boy.
Paris belongs to the wealthy. Like a rat, Linguini is forced to live in the nooks and crannies of a better world. Rock and view aside, Spaghetti's apartment is cramped and musty. A book keeps the fridge upright. Macaroni barely seems to own more than a couch, his bicycle, a TV, some roller skates, and some plants. He goes shopping later, presumably because he has a paycheck to count on at that point. But the morning after Remy's arrival, he opens the fridge and says,
"Eggs gone! Stupid! He's stolen food and hit the road!"
Remy only took eggs and maybe a tomato from the fridge. This was how the fridge had looked before then. Some milk, takeout leftovers, a tomato or two, some canned drinks, and a bottle of sauce. The point is, Linguini's not doing so hot.
I need this job. I've lost so many.
Through the lens of this whole class metaphor, Linguini is much more like a rat than a human.
They think you might be a cook. But you know what I think, Linguini? I think you are a sneaky, overreaching little...
Run!
We're going to talk about empathy and allyship a little later, but yeah, to survive within the world of the wealthy, these two poor characters have to work together.
Neither of us can do this alone, so we gotta do it together, right? You with me?
They are opposed by Skinner, the embodiment of capitalism.
Cooking is not for the faint of heart. You must be imaginative, strong-hearted. You must try things that may not work.
Skinner subverts Gusteau's love for food and creative drive and uses those things to create a brand that markets cheap knockoff frozen food products. He only cares about what sells. He's arrogant, dictatorial, and elitist. Gusteau was always ready to take bold risks and try new things. Skinner fights tooth and nail against any sign of nonconformity because the success of his business hinges on his ability to maintain the status quo and mass produce. It's scary when Linguini starts to gain fame because it turns Linguini into a competitor and distracts from Skinner's brand. As Skinner says, Gusteau's face sells millions of burritos, not Linguini's. When Casserole first arrives on the scene, Skinner reacts with cold disgust, then outrage. He tolerates him as a garbage boy because that role holds no power, but the second Linguini overreaches, Skinner goes right for the throat. Even when he finds out the critic liked Linguini's soup, he wants to fire him.
You can't fire him.
Skinner only relents when he looks around the kitchen and realizes everyone has sided against him. Yay, allyship. He backs off to appease Colette and the rest, but you can tell he doesn't expect or want Linguini to last long in his kitchen.
Welcome to hell. But you will need to know more than soup if you are to survive in my kitchen, boy.
Then Skinner discovers Linguini's lineage.
I can't fire him. He's getting attention. If I fire him now, everyone will wonder why. And the last thing I want is people looking into this.
Skinner can't fire Linguini because the press might discover Linguini's claim to the restaurant as Gusteau's son. Skinner nods when his lawyer says this.
The deadline passes in 3 days. Then you can fire him whenever he ceases to be valuable. And no one will ever know.
Skinner's agreement here shows that he only cares about the approval of his workforce, or even the general public, to a certain extent. In the end, he still has the power to fire whoever he wants. And why employ a competitor whose work will only detract from your business, or who's talented enough to usurp you? Bloodlines are the only reason our heroes are able to overthrow Skinner and take over the restaurant. Without that safeguard, what reason did Skinner have to keep them around so long? I'd bet my hat Ratatouille didn't mean to do this, but I think the situation reflects real life quite well. The success of wealthy businessmen like Skinner depends on their ability to keep people like Remy out of power. They slash social programs and cut wages to create systems where the poor can never advance past a certain rank. They build walls. There are ways to fight your way up through that system as a poor person, but they're few and far between, and require an enormous amount of work, allyship, and sheer luck. Meanwhile, a rich bloodline can work as a sort of cheat code to shoot you straight to the top of the ladder. As we've seen, though, the film doesn't totally disregard those other methods. Let's talk about allyship. I feel like Ratatouille says you should always remember where you came from, because then you'll remember to help others from the same background. Take Colette. In the climax of the film, Colette turns back to help Remy and Rotini.
Why do you think that is?
Well,
because she loves Linguini, I'm sure. But I also think Gusteau's book reminds Colette of where she started from. As a woman, wasn't she also told she couldn't cook? That she didn't belong? Didn't she also have to struggle to carve out a place for herself in a world that didn't belong to her?
Toute voisine is an antiquated hierarchy built upon rules written by stupid old men. Rules designed to make it impossible for women to enter this world.
Because Colette empathizes with Remy and Linguini's situation, she alone comes to their aid. That's how the characters of Ratatouille achieve their dreams. Bloodlines, yes, and also the support of people who have been through the same struggles. In this antiquated hierarchy, any outsider needs help to find a foothold. As Ego says,
the new needs friends.
It's hard to say for sure whether Ego came from poverty, but he did come from rural France, and the fact that he's so connected to what the film designates as a peasant dish makes me suspect he wasn't well off.
Ratatouille? It's a peasant dish.
For whatever reason, somewhere along the line, Ego shrugged off his history and became an authority on high society. Remy wins the day because he appeals to Ego's past and thus reignites his empathy. At the end of the film, Remy starts his own restaurant where he's able to provide many other rats like him with food and shelter. And, I wonder where he got the money to do that. Why would this film point out that Ego went on to become a small business investor, if not to imply he helped fund Remy's restaurant? Because of Remy's reminder, Ego has reshaped his whole career to help small creators get off the ground. So we get a story about a poor person who doesn't topple the system, but with the help of friends from similar backgrounds, manages to dig out a space within that system where they can be themselves and pursue their passions. When you follow this poverty metaphor through the whole film, though, the messages that emerge aren't always great. And maybe that's to be expected. I mean, can you even tell this story without a class mobility metaphor? You make your hero someone who's resented by society and forced to dumpster dive for food, and then make him serve haute cuisine at a fancy restaurant? No matter how you tackle that premise, there's no way to avoid some kind of commentary on capitalism. Zootopia, by comparison, was made to be about prejudice, first and foremost. Ratatouille could be about capitalism, almost as a side effect of its premise. So I want to cut this film some slack. But as far as I can tell, the creators were aware of this metaphor. And with that knowledge, I gotta ask, why did they take this stance right here?
I'm hungry! And I don't know where I am, and I don't know when I'll find food again.
Remy, you are better than that. You are a cook. A cook makes. A thief takes. You are not a thief.
It makes more sense for Remy to be punished when he lets the whole clan steal a fuck ton of food from Gusteau's. I can also accept that Remy gets punished when he tries to steal the saffron, I guess, because he didn't need the saffron. But Ratatouille, as a film, does not want you to steal food. Ever. Full stop.
Fuck you, Disney.
Remy hasn't eaten for days. As he says, he doesn't know when he'll get his next meal. He's only going to take a little
Disney
lot
said,
of bread,
starve.
which nobody from the party would miss. But Ghost Gusteau tells him that would be morally wrong, so Remy abandons the bread and moves on. The next time Remy gets a chance to eat, he makes an omelet. Does he get to eat the omelet? No, because he stole the herbs from a neighbor's garden and took the eggs without Lasagna's permission. Remy only gets to eat once Manicotti gives him food. And look at how starved Remy was. I get the desire to play with the whole thieving rat stereotype. Dangerous road to take with this poverty metaphor at play, but okay. But I don't like that the film frames stealing as a choice when really, due to factors like the cycle of poverty, so many people are forced to steal to survive. Now, Rab, a family film can't endorse stealing.
Taking something that isn't yours just isn't right.
Yeah, I know.
And no.
Yeah, they can just endorse starving to death on the street.
Well, let's look at another famous street rat.
I'll have your hands for a trophy, street rat.
All this for a loaf of bread?
Aladdin, the film, doesn't fault street rats for stealing food because as Aladdin, the character, spells out,
gotta eat to live, gotta steal to eat, otherwise we'd get along.
Gotta eat to live, gotta steal to eat. Aladdin's gotta steal food because otherwise he'll starve to death. These street children would have gone hungry without Aladdin's stolen bread. This scene shows that Aladdin is kind and generous and only resorts to thievery because he has no other option. Compare that gray stance to Ratatouille's black and white one, where you're either a moral person or a thief, with no overlap.
You are better than that. You are a cook. A cook makes, a thief takes. You are not the...
It's a wad of bread, Ghost Gusteau. Get off your high horse and donate to a food bank or something.
Piss off, Ghost!
This film's moral priorities are so... odd? Like, lying? Sometimes necessary. Kidnapping two people? Sometimes necessary. Stealing a bit of bread to stay alive? So that's a moral that grates against the class mobility metaphor. Sure, Remy's allowed to steal Skinner's paperwork, but does that even count as thievery when the documents were barely Skinner's to begin with? Every other time Remy steals, he steals food that strictly belongs to someone else, and the film takes a very firm oppositional stance on that.
You're stealing food? What? How could you? I thought you were my friend. I trusted you!
Yet, people don't remember the moral that way. Check out this Twitter poll. Nearly 86% of the people who responded to this poll believe Ratatouille says stealing is okay when strictly necessary. When I specified, pollers were still torn. Years later, audiences have come away from Ratatouille with Aladdin's moral. My friend Hazel left a fantastic comment that I think sums up the situation perfectly. I think the urgent takeaway here is that, however the film itself portrayed stealing, the cultural aftermath of Ratatouille is very pro-left, i.e. the question is not about Ratatouille, but the place Ratatouille occupies in our collective consciousness. I've also put a positive spin on a story that maybe deep down supports the status quo. Let's rewind for a sec. What did I say a couple minutes ago? So we get a story about a poor person who doesn't topple the system, but with the help of friends from similar backgrounds, manages to dig out a space within that system where they can be themselves and pursue their passions. Is that really a happy ending? Yes, Remy has taken a step forward with help from his friends, but he's still forced to play by the rules of a system that hates his little guts. It's ambiguous as to how much the customers know, rat-wise, but we have no reason to believe Remy can claim credit for his work when Gusteau's got shut down for health violations. This film talks about change, and I dare posit that's what audiences remember most.
Change is nature, Dad. The part that we can influence. And it starts when we decide.
But when all's said and done, how much of nature do the heroes change? Remy and his family have been lifted out of poverty, but rats as a whole are still reviled by society. As far as we know, Remy's still only allowed to cook behind closed doors, and his family are only allowed to share space with the humans when they're hidden behind a wall of plants. The lines between the classes remain strong as ever, minus these few key players. So does Ratatouille promote changing the system, or finding success within its prejudicial constraints? Fans seem to remember the former message, when the latter feels more applicable to me upon reflection. It's not like Remy ends the film like, "And we have big plans," or "We're not done yet." Remy seems content to stay separate and hidden, and that lesson contradicts the much more revolutionary tone many people have come to associate with this film. In all, Ratatouille says some stuff I agree with. The rich will do whatever they can to keep poor people out of positions of power. Remember where you came from. To escape poverty requires allyship and luck and maybe even some subterfuge. And the film says stuff I don't agree with. Stealing food makes you a worse person. You should be content to hide so long as you're allowed to pursue your passion. Whatever. I don't know how to end this video. Is it not enough to simply ramble about rat chefs and systemic poverty for 20 minutes?
Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
We all get to choose what we take from stories. We can still rally around Remy and relate to his struggles and take hope from this film. And bread. Let's take a lot of bread from this film. I really want to piss off Gusteau. Happy New Year, squad. Goodbye, 2020. Love to all my fellow scavengers, and thank you to the allies who make my videos possible.
Very, very excellent video.
Shout out to my top patrons.
I will be subscribing and liking all of these videos that we're watching today, but I would like to extra subscribe and extra like this one.
2021, be kinder to us all. See ya, sinners.
Spirited Away is a 2001 animated film written and directed by Hayao Miyazaki that's full of anti-capitalist themes often found in Marxist theory, such as class struggle, alienation, worker solidarity, and critiques of consumerism. In the world of Spirited Away, workers are alienated from themselves after giving up their names to Yubaba, the owner of a bathhouse for spirits, and the alternative to laboring is being turned into an animal, like what happens to 10-year-old protagonist Chihiro's parents after a bout of overconsumption. It's full of Marxist allegory, but before we dive deeper into the symbolism of Spirited Away and analyze it through a Marxist lens, we first need to talk about its creator, Hayao Miyazaki, and his relationship to Marxism. Miyazaki got his start in animation at Toei Animation Studio in 1963 after graduating from college with degrees in political science and economics. By the time the 22-year-old Miyazaki was hired on as an in-betweener, Toei already had a fairly strong union that had won multiple labor disputes.
Yeah, it was an excellent analysis start.
Miyazaki even led demonstrating animators in a union dispute, and in 1964 he became the union's chief secretary. During this time, Miyazaki considered himself to be a Marxist, though later he went on to state, "During the time I was trying to conclude Nausicaa, I did what some might think is a turnabout. I totally forsook Marxism. I had no choice but to forsake it." Miyazaki may not be a Marxist anymore, but we can still analyze Spirited Away through a Marxist lens to better understand Miyazaki's criticisms of our modern consumerist world, as well as gain a deeper understanding of the world Miyazaki wishes to see, one where kindness and love are prioritized above all else. Speaking of love, I want to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Paired. Paired is an app that you can use with your partner to make time for each other every day and to take care of and deepen your relationship by doing—
This is my Metal Gear now.
What you do is you download it on both of your phones and you love. We need to communicate, and Paired Premium. Alright, back to the video. Miyazaki claims to have forsook Marxism, even stating that, "I decided that it is wrong, that historical materialism is also wrong, and that I shouldn't see things with it," but—
How do you go back once you look at historical materialism and like dialectics and stuff? How do you—
This dialectical method to analyze—
Hold on, I'm gonna rewind.
Which focuses on observing contradictions between historical materialism is also wrong, and that I shouldn't see things with it, but what did he mean by that, exactly? Historical materialism is the application of the Marxist dialectical method to analyzing history, which focuses on observing contradictions between social relations. It argues that the main force that determines the character and development of society is the mode of production. For example, feudalism, capitalism, or socialism, and that the driving force of history is class struggle between those who control the means of production, the ruling class, and those who labor, the working class. This class struggle eventually leads to revolutionary change. Under the capitalist mode of production—
Yeah, back before I was a Twitch Andy, this is all I would watch, is just video essays on shit.
Production and thus have to sell their labor power to the bourgeoisie for a wage. The bourgeoisie exploits the labor of the proletariat to earn profits, which leads to class struggle. In the same interview, Miyazaki explained, "No matter which class one is born into, a stupid person is a stupid person, and a nice one is a nice one."
Oh god, so he's just dumb.
It's just whether they are a nice guy, whether I want to become a friend with them.
Shut up, Miyazaki.
It's a lie.
Shut up, smoke a cigarette and draw some more. Put the fucking art in the bag.
So I've seen Spirited Away probably well over 100 times at this point, because I used to watch it like nearly daily as a kid, and it's literally one of my favorite movies, but it's clear that Miyazaki didn't actually debunk historical materialism and simply holds a very individualistic viewpoint where he believes that Marxist class analysis is just a shorthand way of determining which individuals are nice and correct or not, rather than a method for understanding the greater systems that do indeed impact the behavior of individuals, but don't necessarily determine if they're nice or not. Like, obviously you can be a reactionary laborer, or you can own a company and treat your employees very well, but either way, Marxism isn't a tool for judging individuals and determining whether someone is nice or not, but rather a lens for analyzing and interpreting the world, which Miyazaki forsook because he decided that it's more important to just look at individuals on a case-by-case basis. But
you should subscribe and rewind and read that little thing Kojima put at the end of the game there.
To analyze Spirited Away. Although Miyazaki has claimed, I think that this clear change in my way of thinking came from my writing Nausicaa rather than the change of my position in this society. Of course, as the co-founder of a massively successful and popular animation studio, it would make sense for him to stop identifying with an ideology that he seems to view as capable of determining the morality or niceness of a person based on their class. if you're bourgeois or even petit bourgeois, which Miyazaki is because he is the owner of a company, and you think that Marxism teaches you that those people are bad, even if it doesn't actually, it makes sense to not identify with it. But despite his rejection of Marxism, Miyazaki has said, "I still aspire deep down to a more just society, and I remain influenced by the communist ideal formulated by Marx, even if I have, of course, no affinity with the experiments of real socialism." Which we can see in Spirited Away with its critiques of the destructive nature of capitalism and unchecked consumerism on humans, spirits, and the environment. So let's jump into our Marxist analysis of Spirited Away using the Marxist dialectical method as a framework, while keeping in mind Miyazaki's own perspective on Marxism. 1. Consumerism and crisis. Spirited Away starts off with 10-year-old Chihiro begrudgingly traveling to her new family home with her parents in their 1996 Audi A4 Quattro, a luxurious imported car signifying their socio-economic status as part of the labor aristocracy that, despite being part of the proletariat exploited by the bourgeoisie under capitalism, receive enough concessions from the ruling class and have enough purchasing power to live in relative luxury with a nice car and a house in the suburbs. Miyazaki has stated before, modern life is so thin and shallow and fake. I look forward to when developers go bankrupt, Japan gets poorer, and wild grasses take over, and we can immediately see his anti-modernity, pro-nature perspective in his portrayal of Chihiro's family, and in the rest of the movie as well. Chihiro's dad speeds through the woods, and Chihiro's mom mentions that some people believe that spirits live in the small shrines in the woods, showing that they do not necessarily respect nature or take the time to appreciate it or even believe in the spirits associated with it. Humans are meant to have a reciprocal relationship with nature, but under capitalism, this relationship becomes purely extractive and one-sided, with nature becoming commodified for the benefit of humans regardless of the long-term impact on both humanity and the planet. After Chihiro's dad halts upon seeing a statue in a decrepit building, Chihiro's family walk through the archway and Chihiro's dad declares that he knew it. This was just an abandoned amusement park, mentioning that a whole bunch of them were built until the economy collapsed and shut them down. Chihiro's dad is talking about the economic boom that Japan experienced in the 1980s, which was then followed by a recession starting in 1991. This lost decade, as it's known, led to bankruptcies, lowered consumer spending, an insecure job market, and a lack of social mobility. According to Karl Marx, these boom and bust cycles are a central aspect of the capitalist mode of production and are inevitable in a system driven by profit maximization, as capitalism is. Under capitalism, the economy is not planned and goods are not produced based on the needs of society, but rather based on what companies think will generate the most profit, often resulting in companies producing more goods than consumers need or can afford, leading to a major contradiction. While production expands, the working class's purchasing power remains limited, leading to overproduction relative to demand. Economic growth can only resume after some amount of capital is either destroyed or drastically devalued. Because capitalism is about maximizing profits and there is a tendency for the rate of profit to fall over time, these companies need to find ways to continue earning profits after the devaluation of their products, which can be achieved by cutting workers' wages or, more commonly, raising prices. Inflation. As prices increase, workers can't afford to buy as much, leading to an economic crisis as things become less affordable, leading people to just buy less, because everything's expensive. With each crisis, small businesses like these abandoned theme parks Chihiro's dad mentions are often closed down or absorbed by larger enterprises, leading to monopolization, and wealth becomes concentrated in the hands of fewer and fewer people. As Chihiro's family explores, her parents stumble upon a restaurant with copious amounts of food and start eating. Her dad states it's fine, he's got credit cards and cash. His consumerist mindset allows him to frame this situation as purely economic, where money is the solution, rather than a social or moral matter, allowing him to justify their overconsumption with his ability to pay. Chihiro, skeptical of the food, explores the amusement park, finding a massive bathhouse and a boy named Haku, who warns her to cross the river before sunset. Chihiro tries, but finds that her parents have been turned into pigs, and that the entrance of this abandoned amusement park is flooded. 2. The political economy of Spirited Away. Haku finds Chihiro, helps her not disappear, and walks her across the bridge to the bathhouse, eventually telling her, if you don't get a job, Yubaba will turn you into an animal. Yubaba is the sole owner of this bathhouse for spirits, a massive Meiji-style building. The Meiji era of Japanese history was a time when Western influences, such as capitalism, shaped the ideological and political landscape of Japan. As the sole private owner of an enterprise under this capitalist mode of production, Yubaba is, by definition, part of the bourgeoisie, exploiting the labor of her workers to generate profit for herself. Chihiro must sell her labor power to Yubaba to justify her existence, just as workers must labor under capitalism or be relegated to what Marx and Engels call the relative surplus population or the reserve army of labor. According to Marx, capitalism necessitates the existence of the surplus population, whose existence benefits capital by reducing wages, job security, and labor's ability to challenge capital for fear of joining the surplus. In the spirit world of Spirited Away, if you do not labor, rather than becoming unhoused or unemployed, you simply become a pig like Chihiro's parents. The fact that Chihiro is 10 years old and her working for Yubaba would undoubtedly be considered child labor is never mentioned, alluding to the fact that the mode of production in the spirit world of Spirited Away is a form of unregulated capitalism with limited labor protections, especially for children. Honestly, one of the biggest failures of capitalism is child labor. I feel like even people who like capitalism would agree, right? Chihiro follows Haku's instructions to make it to the boiler room where she meets Kamaji, who introduces himself to Chihiro as the slave to the boiler that heats the baths, showing that he understands his position in the labor hierarchy. He must work to earn money rather than earning money simply from owning means of production like the bourgeois Yubaba. His 6 arms allow him to do the labor of 3 people, likely without additional benefits or pay, representative of the unpaid overtime that corporate salaried employees often do, especially during these times of mass layoffs when one person is often forced to do the jobs of 3 people. Despite understanding his position as working class in the class hierarchy, Kamaji does not seem to have class solidarity with the soot sprites that he manages. This is partially because they're soot animated via magic, so he thinks of them as expendable, fungible laborers, similar to how the bourgeoisie view their workers under capitalism, although Kamaji is not bourgeois, he's just a manager, but still a worker. As Chihiro watches the soot sprites work, one of the soot sprites gets squished by a piece of coal, which Chihiro then picks up, throwing it in the boiler per Kamaji's request, despite the fact that she's not being paid for her labor. And that's honestly kind of how tech interviews are. The sprites gather around Chihiro in a worker revolt, attempting to offload their labor onto her, showing us that the most powerful tool a worker has is their ability to withhold their labor. Kamaji tells her not to take the soot sprites' jobs because if they don't work, then they'll turn back into soot. Another symbol of workers needing to work under capitalism in order to stay alive. If you do not labor, you will not live. You will literally become inanimate. Lin enters Kamaji's room to give him food and sees Chihiro, shouting that Kamaji will be in big trouble for hiding the human. Kamaji says that Chihiro is his granddaughter and wants a job there, symbolic of the fact that nepotism makes it easier to get ahead in life and to gain employment, particularly under capitalism. Lin says no way until Kamaji offers her a roast newt, bribing her with luxuries that are often unaffordable for workers like her, but easier to acquire for middle management laborers like Kamaji who hold a higher position in the labor hierarchy with closer proximity to the bourgeoisie, despite still being part of the working class. Kamaji tells Chihiro to talk directly to Yubaba to get a job. He himself does not have the power to hire employees. Once Chihiro makes it to the top floor with help from Lin and the radish spirit, Yubaba uses her magic to drag Chihiro over to where she's sitting, showing us all the opulent and luxurious hallways in Yubaba's massive penthouse and the wealth that Yubaba has acquired, all thanks to the laborers downstairs. Chihiro asks for a job, and Yubaba magically zips her lips shut and insults her, telling Chihiro that her parents are pigs now and threatening to turn her into a piglet or a lump of coal. Though it is through magic that Yubaba closes Chihiro's mouth, this is very much reminiscent of how the bourgeoisie have near total control over the proletariat, often enough to silence them or prevent them from speaking up against their own mistreatment. Yubaba also tries to get Chihiro to divulge who helped her get there, but Chihiro has solidarity with her fellow workers and would never snitch on them. As Chihiro continues to ask for a job, Yubaba starts shouting, jumps at Chihiro, and pokes and prods at her, showing that as the bourgeoisie, she has all the power in this relationship and there is no way to hold her accountable for mistreatment of workers. As Yubaba's baby starts crying, Chihiro continues asking for a job. Yubaba begrudgingly agrees, feeling regret about taking an oath to give a job to anyone who asks. Yubaba wants to engage in worker discrimination and is upset that an external force, in this case the oath, prevents that. After Chihiro signs the contract, Yubaba magically lifts part of Chihiro's name off the paper, stating that it belongs to her now and bestowing Chihiro with a new name, Sen. This represents how, along with Chihiro's new employment role, comes alienation and a loss of identity outside of that of a worker. According to Karl Marx, laboring under capitalism alienates us from the process of our labor over which we have no control, The fruits of our labor, which the capitalist reaps the rewards of in the form of profit, our fellow laborers, and our own human essence. Yubaba calls in Haku and tells him to get Sen a job. Haku acts like he doesn't even know Chihiro, now Sen, at all, even telling the other workers that if she's bad, they can basically just eat her, and I guess it's not cannibalism because they're not humans. As Sen receives her new uniform after being assigned to work as Lin's assistant, Lin tells her that Haku is Yubaba's henchman and to not trust anything he says, revealing to us that Haku is not a worker like Sen and Lin, but occupies a petit bourgeois class position as Yubaba's apprentice. Despite this higher position in the class hierarchy, Haku is still under Yubaba's dominion, evidenced by the fact that shortly after this interaction, Haku takes Sen to see her parents, and we learn that Yubaba has also stolen his name like the rest of the laborers. Thus, even though Haku holds more authority than the other workers, he is still alienated from his true self and also subject to capitalist exploitation. Like middle management under capitalism, Haku occupies a precarious position. He has more power and responsibility than other workers, but is still not truly autonomous or free. We can also see that Yubaba doesn't control her workers through sheer violence, but by alienating them from themselves and taking away any identity they have outside of the labor they perform for her. 3. Labor and class struggle. On Sen's first day of work, she and Lin are instructed to clean the big tub per Yubaba's orders. Lin exclaims that this is frog work, demonstrating that even among the workers there is still a hierarchy. The frogs normally do the more difficult jobs like cleaning this giant filthy bathtub, but because Yubaba has full control over how this bathhouse is run, Sen and Lin are in no position to decline these orders, thus being forced into performing labor outside of their job descriptions despite its potential hazards. Lin prompts Sen to ask the foreman for an herbal soak token, and when she does, he refuses. The foreman represents the reactionary elements of the working class. Rather than having class solidarity, he discriminates against Sen simply because he doesn't approve of her humanness or her status as an outsider and newcomer. He is alienated from his fellow worker, who he refuses to see as a fellow worker due to their differing identities. Luckily, No Face gives Sen a token, and then Lin instructs Sen on how to fill the tub, and Sen yet again falls on the job, showing us the potentially dangerous nature of this role, though luckily Sen has plot armor and remains unharmed. Lin says she's gonna go get them breakfast, showing us that the workers have to start their workdays before they are even provided with a meal. The bathhouse is essentially like a company town where laborers both live and work. The workers are exploited by Yubaba so she can generate profit from their surplus value, and in return, they are provided with the means to survive, a roof over their head, and food, but only when Yubaba permits it. Additionally, while Yubaba has this enormous and opulent floor all to herself, her workers must live and sleep in crowded conditions with little to no privacy. Again, showing this disparity between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. It's clear that Yubaba represents the bourgeoisie and her workers represent the proletariat, but what about the customers of the bathhouse? The spirits. Though their relationship to the means of production is never explicitly stated, we know that they possess the wealth to pay for these luxurious services offered at the bathhouse, and therefore must be either petit bourgeois, equivalent to small business owners, or part of the labor aristocracy like Chihiro's parents. These spirits come to the bathhouse to wash away their burdens, such as pollution, symbolic of how the labor aristocracy and the petit bourgeois are able to consume luxuries and receive therapeutic care without challenging the exploitation underlying the capitalist system. A stink spirit arrives to the bathhouse, and Yubaba gives Sen the task of cleaning him, threatening to turn Sen into a piece of coal if she doesn't perform well, once again showing Yubaba's absolute power over her workers as the bourgeoisie. Yubaba does not labor herself, and yet as the bourgeoisie, she is in a position that allows her to give her newest worker the toughest client, and laugh at her as she struggles to do her new job. Sen is, both figuratively and literally, in a toxic work environment. After Sen falls into the spirit's sludge while filling the tub, the spirit picks her up and shows her that there's something stuck in his side. Yubaba creates a rope via magic that Sen ties to the thorn in the spirit's side and leads her workers in pulling a mess of garbage out of the spirit. Seeing Yubaba among all her workers makes us acutely aware of the contrast between their appearances. While the workers wear simple traditional Japanese attire, Yubaba adorns herself with luxurious Western-style dress and jewelry. Though she and her workers have differing class interests, in this scene they still all work together for the benefit of the bathhouse, eventually ripping a bunch of pollutants and garbage out of what is actually a river spirit. This river spirit is symbolic of the environmental degradation caused by overconsumption and industrial waste. Problems often created by capitalist practices. His transformation can be interpreted as a critique of how environmental damage is superficially dealt with in capitalist societies without addressing the root cause, the economic system itself. The spirit gives Sen a dumpling as a gift, reciprocating the care that she has shown him. As the water level lowers, the gold left by the spirit is revealed and the workers jump to try to collect it. Chichiaku, a frog who is higher up in the hierarchy of the bathhouse and is thus disconnected from the class interests of his fellow workers, instead upholding Yubaba's class interests and showing his position as a class traitor, yells for them to stop. It's company property! You are not benefiting from all this surplus value, no. After the river spirit flies out the door, Yubaba praises Sen for making them lots of money. Sen has proven her ability to produce shareholder value for Yubaba, effectively making Yubaba change her opinion of her. Saki's on the house tonight, Yubaba says, and then tells everyone to hand over the gold because any money earned in the bathhouse belongs to Yubaba. We see that even if the workers make a massive profit, as they did just now, the surplus value goes straight to Yubaba rather than to the workers themselves, as is typical under capitalism. Afterwards, Sen and Lin discuss their day together. As a train passes by, Lin mentions that someday she'll get on the train and leave the bathhouse for good. But as an alienated worker whose life revolves solely around work, she has no real plan on how or when that'll be. As with the rest of the bathhouse workers, Lin has no aim to challenge the power structure of the workplace. All she can hope for is to escape capitalism. 4. Commodification and alienation. No-Face represents alienation, unchecked consumption, and the commodification of everything, including Sen's attention. He is initially passive, but upon learning that he can exchange bath tokens for Sen's attention and trade gold for commodities, he becomes a monster who consumes everything in sight. His greed mirrors the capitalist drive for endless accumulation, but despite his mindless consumption, he still feels empty and unfulfilled, especially when his endless wealth is not enough to buy Sen's attention, which he treats as a commodity. When Sen rejects No-Face's gold so she can leave to go take care of Haku, No-Face, upset by the fact that money cannot buy Sen's attention, becomes destructive and starts eating workers to attempt to consume his way towards emotional regulation. No-Face is alienated from himself and others, reduced to a consumer and driven to overconsume to fill the void created by this alienation. While Yubaba sleeps, the workers also try to get as much gold from No-Face as possible, knowing that if Yubaba claims the gold, the workers won't see any of it and their surplus value will be extracted to profit Yubaba, so she can keep adding to her penthouse. Sen eventually makes her way to Yubaba's penthouse with the help of one of the paper shikigami that attacked Haku, which then transforms into Zeniba, Yubaba's sister. Zeniba explains that Haku stole her magic golden seal and will perish unless it's returned. Haku strikes the shikigami and Zeniba disappears. Haku and Sen, along with Bo and the bird, now transformed by Zeniba's magic, fall to the boiler room where Sen gives Haku half of the river spirit's dumpling, causing him to vomit up the golden seal and a black slug that Sen crushes with her foot. Also, I just have to say I love Chihiro's expressive hair. I would love to have expressive hair, that sounds fun. Sen resolves to return the seal to Zeniba and apologize on behalf of Haku, and Kamaji gives her the train tickets he's been saving for 40 years to do so. Before heading to Swamp Bottom to meet with Zeniba, Sen confronts No-Face, who asks her what she wants. Sen has no consumerist aspirations, simply wanting to leave as she's got somewhere to go. No-Face, who now believes he can buy anything he wants, attempts to buy Sen's attention. Yet again. Sen feeds him the other half of the dumpling and he chases her throughout the bathhouse, vomiting at random intervals before eventually emptying his stomach, purging his consumerist aspirations. Sen gets to the train station with Lin's help and she, Bo, the bird, and No-Face all head off towards Swamp Bottom. Yubaba is furious about Sen letting in No-Face and leaving, but 3 workers defend Sen, informing Yubaba that she actually saved them from No-Face. That's some worker solidarity right there. Haku shows up and tells Yubaba that she hasn't noticed that something precious to her has been replaced. Yubaba breaks the spells in the room, the fake baby turns back into 3 heads, and the gold left behind by No-Face turns to dust. No-Face has committed fraud! Yubaba is so enraged by this fact and the fact that her baby is missing that she starts breathing fire right in Haku's face and wrapping him with her hair, again displaying her complete power over her workers. Haku says Yubaba can have her baby back as long as she tears up Sen's contract and gives her her mother and father back. Yubaba says yes, as long as she can give Sen one final test. Sen and company meet Zeniba and Sen apologizes on behalf of Haku. Zeniba informs them that the slug Haku puked up was actually Yubaba's way of controlling Haku. Despite his higher class position, he was still subservient to Yubaba via this magical spell. We also learn that the protective spell on Zeniba's seal could only be broken with true love, acknowledging the love between Haku and Sen. For the second time, Zeniba complains about Yubaba. They may be twins, but they're polar opposites, probably because Yubaba is a capitalist and Zeniba is not. This dynamic between Yubaba and Zeniba leads me to believe that twin studies suggest that the capitalist twin will always be tackier and just generally worse than the non-capitalist twin. Zeniba gives Sen a magic hairband made with the threads woven together by her friends for protection, symbolizing the power of friendship and solidarity. Haku arrives, Zeniba forgives him, and Sen reveals her real name, Chihiro, to Zeniba. While Haku is flying Sen, Bo, and the bird back to the bathhouse, Chihiro remembers falling into the Kohaku River and the water carrying her to shore. Chihiro correctly guesses that Haku's real identity is the spirit of the Kohaku River, which Chihiro says was filled in and is all apartments now, which is why Haku couldn't find his way home. Yet another critique of how capitalism destroys nature for profit. Also, I cry every time I watch this scene. It's so cute. I love love. Don't you? You better. After arriving at the bathhouse, Yubaba tests whether Chihiro can identify her parents in a group of pigs. Chihiro correctly answers that it's none of them. Chihiro's contract disappears, she thanks Yubaba and everyone else, and Haku takes her to the edge of the formerly flooded river, telling her that her parents woke up on the other side. Haku says he's going to quit being Yubaba's apprentice and promises to Chihiro that they'll see each other again. Chihiro, still wearing the magical hairband, crosses the riverbed and meets up with her parents. They emerge from the tunnel and their car is covered in branches and leaves, probably because they were in the spirit world for a while. We see that the statue, which formerly had two faces, and the exterior of the tunnel, which was once pink, is now stone, and Chihiro's family leaves for their new home. 5. Conclusion. Taken as a whole, what does Spirited Away teach us about the struggle between capital and labor, capital's destructive effects on nature, and the type of world that we should aspire to? Miyazaki, as a former Marxist, clearly understands the antagonistic relationship between capital and labor, and highlights this class hierarchy and the differing interests of the proletariat and the bourgeoisie via the relationships between the workers and Yubaba. Yubaba has complete power over her workers. She alienates them from themselves, strips them of their identities outside of work, extracts their surplus value, pokes and prods at them, threatens to turn them into coal, threatens to slaughter their parents, and breathes fire directly into their faces with no repercussions. And yet, Miyazaki himself has said that Yubaba is putting all her efforts to protect the bathhouse. She is not a villain. Despite all her best intentions, due to her position as the owner of the bathhouse, Yubaba still exerts dominance over all her workers and is incapable of being held accountable after crossing a boundary due to the nature of the capitalist system. And I would say that having your boss breathe fire in your face or threaten to kill your parents is probably a boundary you wouldn't want to cross. Yubaba may not be a villain, but the nature of her bourgeois position and her antagonistic treatment of her workers in a system where that's considered standard still makes us perceive her as a villain, regardless of what Miyazaki says. It almost seems like being in his position has made him forget how terrible it is to deal with a boss like that you literally can't hold accountable and have to see daily. Yeah, bosses in real life don't breathe fire in your face, but if they could, they probably would, and nothing would stop them. Furthermore, given that we know that Miyazaki has stated that what matters is not one's position in the class hierarchy, but rather whether they are a nice person or not, Haku's petite bourgeois position, combined with his kindness towards Chihiro, is likely meant to get us, the audience, to consider the fact that his class position is not indicative of who he is as a person. He can be Yubaba's petite bourgeois henchman and still be a good and helpful and kind person, or a river spirit. Additionally, none of the workers attempt to challenge the system. They don't like it, but the only goal workers like Lin, Chihiro, and Haku have is escaping the system and escaping the bathhouse, and no longer working at Yubaba's bathhouse, rather than smashing the existing system and building a new one. Through the characters of the Stink Spirit, who is actually a river spirit dealing with pollution, and Haku, whose river was paved over with apartments, Spirited Away also critiques the environmental destruction caused by capitalist development, urging us to care for nature rather than prioritizing material goods. Miyazaki also demonstrates his hatred of consumerism through Chihiro's parents and through No-Face, while still remaining sympathetic to them as alienated beings who consume, simply as a means to feel less alienated. Although Chihiro experiences capitalist oppression as part of the working class, her laboring under capitalism in Yubaba's bathhouse is viewed as a mechanism for her character development rather than a purely oppressive force. At the beginning of the film, Chihiro is portrayed as easily frightened and unsure of herself, but through laboring, she grows as a person, becoming more self-assured and confident. According to Spirited Away, though capitalism leads to environmental destruction, alienation, and a culture of overconsumption, laboring under capitalism can also be a means of growing as a person. But is it really the laboring that makes her better off, or is it the connections that she makes along the way? I mean, really, it just shows us the power of worker solidarity in allowing us to survive capitalism. Chihiro is changed for the better by the friends she makes along the way and the love she has for Haku, more so than just through sheer labor. It is the support of those around her that helps her make it through, which showcases the importance of having solidarity with your fellow workers. In the end, it is Chihiro and Haku's love for each other, the bond between humanity and the spirits of nature, that saves them from having to continue laboring under Yubaba. There is no proletariat revolution that deposes Yubaba and installs a workers' democracy, and given Miyazaki's individualistic viewpoint, this makes sense. Spirited Away does not aim to teach us that we can go out there and change the system. Instead, it teaches us that laboring can help change individuals for the better, but only if you have solidarity with your fellow workers. It's only through loving each other, knowing oneself, rejecting consumerism, and connecting with nature that we can truly escape our oppression. It's not a bad message. These are objectively great things. We should absolutely do those things. Go make friends and touch grass, it's good for you. But as we see in Spirited Away, and in reality, it is the larger capitalist system that glorifies consumerism, alienates us from ourselves and one another, creates class struggle, and treats nature as a resource to be extracted that makes doing so very difficult. For Yubaba, for Chihiro's parents, for No-Face, for the spirits, and for the bathhouse workers whose lives revolve solely around work and who are mesmerized by No-Face's endless supply of gold. Haku and Chihiro were lucky to escape, but what about everyone else? Maybe after Chihiro comes back to the human world, Yubaba's workers do revolt and install a workers' democracy, but given that Miyazaki has forsook Marxism, I'm guessing their duties as alienated laborers, working under a bourgeois witch, must continue. Clearly, Miyazaki doesn't want to inspire a proletarian revolution. He just wants a world full of kindness, love, and connection with each other and with nature, rather than this consumerist, exploitative, destructive capitalist mess. Which makes sense, especially given his thoughts on Marxism. Even though Spirited Away is not a revolutionary movie, and I don't particularly want it to be because that would also get into some weird, like, almost colonial tropes where the outsider that knows nothing about this society goes into the society and rescues them. I think that it's still a lovely message and a beautiful movie. Like, it's just so cute. I love it so much. However, given that the character of society is determined by the mode of production, which includes the means and relations of production, as established earlier, it is only through changing the relations of production from private to collective ownership of the means of production that we can end capitalist alienation, exploitation, and environmental destruction, and truly change the character of society for the better. But as Spirited Away reminds us, while we work towards that, we must love each other, know ourselves, reject consumerism, and strengthen our connection to nature. Thanks for watching, and thank you so much to Paired for sponsoring this video. If you want to try out the Paired app with your partner, click my link below to get 50% off Paired Premium so you can maintain and deepen your connection with your partner. This video was also made possible by my amazing patrons on Patreon.
So, a few months back, I was doom scrolling on Instagram. Wouldn't recommend. And I came across a video of someone sitting on their kitchen floor crying. I clicked on the comments and, holy moly, to say that the atmosphere was unsympathetic would be an understatement. It was downright hostile. Now, let's put aside the strange, sad fishing setup of the whole thing. I acknowledge that filming oneself crying and then posting it online is something that would be inexplicable to a medieval peasant. I wouldn't recommend it to a friend. But the comments weren't all about that. In fact, most of them were about something else, saying that she had it coming and rejoicing in her sadness. Now, what did this person do to deserve such vitriolic mockery online? At first I was sad, then I saw poly. It was a poly, of course it failed. Womp womp, polyamory L, Clowntown population U. Wow, a failed poly. What a surprise. Be polyamorous. There's a lot going on here. The internet has gotten too mean. It feels like people have gotten meaner. Anonymity and disconnect emboldens people to say things that they would never have the guts to say in real life. At least I hope. I also can't help but notice that most of the comments seem to be coming from people who appear to be men. Why didn't you post the argument online? Would love to know his side. Oops, someone missed the lesbian and WLW hashtags. Or perhaps he just doesn't know what a lesbian is. But the aspect I want to focus on today is the hatred towards this person being polyamorous, because it isn't exclusive to the comment section of this video. People really have beef with poly people.
Me losing all respect for someone the moment they say they're polyamorous. Oh, you're poly? Yeah. We have literally nothing to talk about. You can leave me alone forever. This is how polyamorous people look to me.
Happy Valentine's Day. My name is Tara Mooney and this is the only channel on YouTube where all videos are written and produced by a cow. She couldn't be in the video today because she's actually hosting a Galentine's event, but if you... Wait, she didn't invite me. That is rude. Cancel her. But if you like this video and subscribe to our channel, she might appear in the next video. The word polyamory is on people's lips, especially of late. And despite the premise of this video, social awareness of polyamory is growing. But it's no new thing. The practice of non-monogamy exists across the world. You'll see that today that a lot of the representation of these kinds of relationships, you know, in the mainstream media and the press tends to be focused on middle class and upper income North Americans. But representation does not always reflect reality.
I can't believe my battery is still going.
It often doesn't. Ask a poly person to define polyamory. Each of them will give you a different answer. Cat Black has a wealth of videos and insight on polyamory and was my online introduction to it.
I'm polyamorous and I wanted to talk about what polyamory means to me personally. For me personally, polyamory is not about having multiple sexual partners. It's about having love for more than one person and being able to maintain that romantic love with more than one person. I sort of look at my capacity for love like a glass and the water in the glass as love. And I think that my glass is a little bit larger than a lot of other people's. So I'm totally capable of having multiple commitments to more than one person. And no, I'm not polyamorous because I couldn't find somebody to be monogamous with me. In fact, I kind of realized that I was polyamorous when I was in a monogamous relationship. And I realized that it was totally possible for me to love another person and I would be totally comfortable with my partner also loving another person. What I've appreciated about polyamory is it allows me to appreciate my partners for their very own unique qualities, as opposed to resenting them for not being my absolute everything. I have 4 long-term partners and I'm very, very happy.
Now, I think it's important to define my terms to avoid any misunderstanding. So let me do so. So poly comes from the Greek word for many and amory from the Latin for love. Poly, many, plus gamy, marriage, equals polygamy, i.e. multiple spouses. Polygyny, when a man has multiple wives. Polyandry, when a woman has multiple husbands. Polygamy is illegal in most places. Just because someone
it's just the colored light
doesn't mean they're pro-polygamy. And even if they are pro-polygamy,
it's yellow, then
they may not advocate for it on religious grounds, but more that polyamorous relationships can be recognized under the law. Nonetheless, I'm solely going to be focusing on polyamorous people today, not polygamists. The people I'll be referring to will mostly be in North America, because most of my sources are in English, and as a classic uncultured Brit, I only speak English, I do. That's my cultural reference. I am trying to learn Simlish though.
Bleep bloop, baba kadloo, gloopsy, grabban doopy, greebo can dobin snoke. Group go, Gavin Stoopy.
Oh, and this distinction between married versus unmarried does not apply to the word monogamous. We use monogamy, one plus marriage, to refer to any arrangement where two people only commit romantically to each other, regardless of whether they are married or not. Ambiamorous is a term to describe people who are content with both monogamous and polyamorous relationships. Some people who are polyamorous define it as a big part of their identity, whereas some people just refer to it as a relationship style that they happen to practice. Polyamory allows for multiple romantic and sexual connections, whereas open relationships are typically defined as a relationship where two people romantically commit solely to each other, but allow for sexual explorations with others. Swinging is an example of this. There's also the term monogamish, coined by author, columnist, and gay activist Dan Savage, which is mostly monogamous with a little squish around the edges. Basically, polyamory is a form of non-monogamy, but not all non-monogamy is polyamory. I know, this is a lot. Bear with me, I just want to avoid any misunderstandings. Because often when people criticize polyamory, they're often criticizing something else entirely. I've seen people say things like, oh, it's bad and that's why it's illegal. Polyamory isn't illegal, at least where I live and likely where you live too. Polygamy is a different thing. I could go on for aeons introducing you to a plethora of terminology. Hierarchical polyamory, non-hierarchical polyamory, polyfidelity, solo polyamory, comet partner, metamor, polysaturated, relationship anarchy, compersion, kitchen table polyamory.
Are you overstimulated?
There's a lot, okay? But if you're polyamorous and you're watching this, you probably know all of this already. And if you're not and you're watching this, you might be starting to get a little bit lost. I don't think you actually need to know the minutiae. This video isn't running defense for polyamory as a practice. That's actually not the point. I want to explore why a lot of people online and in real life seem to hate polyamorous people. The people. I make this distinction because I do believe that there are merits in criticizing the behavior of non-monogamous individuals. You know, there are people who practice non-monogamy unethically, unethical non-monogamy.
I am polyamorous myself, but yeah, there's a lot of unethical polyamory. And this particular subsect I like to call Pokemon trainers, because there are people that make spreadsheets, and that's because that's what's best for their brain. But when you are making a spreadsheet because you have to, because without it, you cannot keep track of all of your partners, that's a problem in my mind. Like, if you are referring to people and your partners as resources, that's a huge problem, huge red flag for me. It shows me that you want to be popular over caring for your partners.
It's okay to talk about your bad experiences where you felt coerced or where you were dating someone and they didn't disclose it. You're allowed to talk about these experiences and criticize people's behavior and hold them accountable. I will say it's important to remember that in every philosophy, there are people who practice it imperfectly, you know, feminism, veganism. So tarring the whole group with a negative brush is not fair in my opinion. Now, I'm going to introduce you to one more term, consensual non-monogamy, i.e. any arrangement where people have multiple consensual romantic, sexual, and/or intimate relationships. So why would anyone take issue with what consenting adults do in their own relationships and bedrooms, you might ask? Great question. It's almost like I wrote it. Well, their issue appears to be that, allegedly, they're ugly.
It's the well-known fact that you don't see many incredibly attractive people in polycules.
Challenges made me realize I don't hate polyamory as a concept, just hate when ugly people do it.
Why do people in open relationships always look like that? I'm being very non-specific here, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. I have a working theory on this, okay? And it's kind of mean, it's not my idea, don't shoot the messenger here. I saw some meme once upon a time that was like, somebody will have an open relationship just so they can date 3 threes and say they're in a relationship with a 9. Unfortunately, I don't know if that's how the scale, which is nonsense, really works, You know, it's not like a cumulative thing. Guys, I just don't know how this shit's happening. It's like the most confusing thing in the world to me. You've rarely seen like an 8, 9, 10 in an open relationship. That's all I'm saying. Why do people in open relationships always look like that? I'm being very non-specific here.
No, because what do you mean by that?
Welcome, welcome, it's a freak show, and you get a freak, and you get a freak. To call this discourse would be generous, and bear in mind I regularly use the word discourse as a pejorative, mockingly, because I am a relentless mocker. As I'm sure you suspected, I was cool and popular in school.
Because tonight will be the night that I will fall for you over again.
I was one of those popular kids who would make fun of you for normal human behaviour, like drinking out of a water bottle or reading. Kids are mean. Correction, adults engage in mocking. In case you're employed, there's been discourse for a while now about how polyamorous folks look a certain way. They have a look. You know, the look.
Like that. I'm being very non-specific here, but you know exactly what I'm talking about.
They look like that.
This TikTok about poly people and the aftermath of it, I think, is a really good case study in how there's such an appetite to dunk on polyamorous people, especially online. He posted the first one, got responses, and then, as I showed you, made a second one where he made a compilation of all the people who responded. And as you could see, a lot of them were gender non-conforming, plus size, and alternative looking. He even included someone who isn't even polyamorous, just non-binary, so they made the cut. You know, he likes to claim that this is all a joke, but if you look at the comments he's liked comments implying that polyamorous people are weak, and obviously has an issue with it. Now, we could debate about how much responsibility he bears in all this. I think some irresponsible platforming has occurred. There were people who got harassed as a result of this.
People in open relationships always look like that. I'm being...
No, because what do you mean by that? Honestly, what do you mean by that? Now,
He was liking unkind comments about the people in the video, even though it was just a joke. You know, people commenting saying, oh, where's their profile? I want to find them. The person who got most targeted even made a follow-up video, and he commented saying, oh, sorry, it's just jokes. And they sort of responded saying, you know, and they were saying, I get that, but like the result of it has been harmful, and, you know, autistic and non-binary people have been targeted. And I'm sure him and the people who have enjoyed this will say, you know, it's not that deep. But I think this really demonstrates the contempt people have for polyamorous people, especially because the most vocal people online are queer-coded. A lot of queer people practice polyamory. Non-binary people, neurodivergent people. He can claim all he likes that this is just a joke, and, you know, the people who have been upset by this and have received harassment as a result need to just laugh it off. And even if you could give some charitability to the first video where you're like, oh, it's just a, you know, a joke, that's probably a bit too mean for your taste, I think this next video just completely lays bare what he thinks about the people he's joking about.
I made a lot of people in open relationships mad yesterday, didn't I? A lot of polyamorous people, a lot of non-binary folks, kind of getting equally offended. But there's an interesting piece to that. See, some of these people didn't give a shit. Some of them were laughing about it. A lot of them were DMing me and laughing about it. Well, why? Why would they laugh at themselves? Because they don't identify or think that they are part of the group that look like that. They're the ones that aren't getting offended by this because they hear the joke and they go, ha, that's funny, that's not me. And a lot of them it's not, because here's the really important part to this. The ones who don't look like that, the ones who look normal, so to speak, they don't advertise this stuff. Why don't they advertise it though? Because as many of them told me, if you advertise that you are open, poly, non-monogamous, whatever, then people who look like that start hitting you up incessantly.
Oh, so it's fine as long as if you don't look like that. Whereas if you do actually look like that, then it's fair game. Gotcha. And listen, you know me. I like jokes. I like a goof. I like a gaff. So if you've been around since the days where I looked like Jim Carrey from Dumb and Dumber, you know, when I first heard that joke of, oh, polyamorous people have a certain look, like, you know, in jest, I did sort of exhale through my nostrils. Because, you know, septum piercings.
Sir, will you please stop staring at me? Where's the rest of you?
Vegans have a look. We can all have a jolly about that. If you can chuckle and move on without forming contempt for polyamorous people in the world, great. But people are taking this too far. There's light-hearted jokes, and then there's, how is every poly person ugly? Every poly person I see on TikTok looks like they smell like the water left in the pot after you boil hot dogs.
The funniest part about media portraying polyamory is they always try to use attractive people instead of the moist, foul-smelling, flesh beasts of size from Portland. Polyamory is almost exclusively practiced by.
What I'm about to say might seem
what's up,
obvious, but isn't
I
this
can't
just
stop streaming.
old-fashioned bullying?
Actually, on second thought, I've realised that I probably am just being too sensitive. You know, I actually think it's really funny when random strangers come up to me online and say that I stink of poo-poo and steaming horse piss and more poo-poo with some hot dogs. That's actually really funny. Anyone would find that really funny.
There's something so incredibly normie about hating on someone for being ugly. It's basic. Homo sapiens are so evolved in so many ways. Like, you know, we've invented vaccines, the iPhone, we've stepped on the moon. But we still can't get over our instinctive disgust reaction when we see someone that we wouldn't want to reproduce with. What's that about? There are many video essays on discrimination against ugly people and pretty privilege.
I just want to majorly stress the air quotes on the use of the word ugly in this video.
People who are uniquely beautiful, who are not traditionally pretty, who then decide to go outside of the realm of normal and do a unique hair color, unique makeup, and fashion that may not be normalized will always bring out the absolute scum of the earth. People who are 100% trash will drag themselves out of the gutters. They will come out from underneath the rocks that they are living under and leave the most heinous comments. And for what? To hurt a stranger's feelings who are just trying to get their hair done? Like, what did you get from this? You don't have any superpowers. It doesn't make you any better. If anything, it makes you worse. So what is the point of these comments? Please tell me. To top that off, most of these people are full-grown adults, and you guys should be so ashamed of yourselves. I'm embarrassed for you. This isn't even second or third hand embarrassment. This is like fourth and fifth hand embarrassment.
If I were to say, you don't hate polyamorous people, you just hate ugly people, that wouldn't capture the whole truth. And I can't help but notice that the poly people who are being called ugly are visibly queer.
A lot of non-binary folks kind of getting equally offended.
There is no right or wrong way to look gay, but there are signals you can send to send the gays your way.
Now, with that in mind, I think when people are mocking poly people for having that look, it isn't simply a personal disdain for ugliness. It's a political position, video essayist core. Because looking like that represents a political position that you don't agree with, a way of life that you don't agree with, a definition of conservatism, commitment to traditional values and ideas with opposition to change or innovation. That goes hard. 8 or 9 years ago, when a fella saw someone online with blue hair and a septum piercing, they would call them an SJW, social justice warrior. This isn't that different. Being polyamorous doesn't necessitate being liberal or left-wing, but there is a trend, there's a correlation. For some queer polyamorous folks, their queerness and their polyamory are intertwined. So in 2018, social psychologist Dr. Rhonda Balzarini carried out a study along with her colleagues at the University of Western Ontario, studying the demographic backgrounds of 2,428 polyamorous individuals and 539 monogamous ones by asking participants to take an online survey. Her team found that polyamorous people tend to identify more as bisexual/pansexual, are more likely to report being divorced, and make less money yearly than monogamous couples. Only slightly more people who were in poly relationships reported having a bachelor's degree or higher and identified as Democrat. When it came to political affiliation, polyamorous folks often chose other, writing in anarchist, progressive, democratic socialist, and none. There were no major differences between groups when it came to ethnicity, except that respondents in poly relationships were significantly more likely to identify as multi-ethnic and native. It isn't a shock that conservatives are less likely to outwardly identify as polyamorous. They may, do some non-monogamy, they may swing in secret, but embracing polyamorous as a label is a different thing. Oh, as a side note, I had to share this because it was so interesting. In my research, I found that there is a peculiar exception to this general rule. Loving More is a non-profit founded in 1984 with the purpose of advocating for polyamorous people. Its purpose is described as follows: to educate people about and support polyamory as a valid choice in loving relationships and family lifestyle. It was founded by a woman called Ryam Nearing and her two husbands. Historian Christopher M. Gleason states in American Poly, a book on the history of polyamory in North America, Nearing was uniquely suited to fight for ethical non-monogamy with the cultural climate of the Reagan era. He states that Nearing was pro-family, pro-fidelity, and a fiscal conservative. Joined by Deborah Anapol, a polyamorous clinical psychologist, Nearing presented a form of non-monogamy that did not chide conservative reverence for family values. Non-monogamy could be the loyal spouse's helpmeet, they argued, a release valve that might keep a frustrated wife or husband from blowing the roof off the entire institution. Fascinating. Putting that aside, generally, at least in North America, polyamory was and is countercultural. 3 years ago now, I made a video on amatonormativity, which, in short, is the cultural notion that all people want to be in a romantic relationship, and that is how one achieves a fulfilled life. It's really helpful in understanding aromanticism, but also, in part, polyamory. Because under amatonormativity is the prescribed idea that a person should find the one, their other half, i.e. a single romantic partner to complete them, aka mononormativity. Monogamy is the default. There is also the concept of the relationship escalator, the default set of societal expectations for intimate relationships, i.e. the goal at the top of the escalator is to achieve a permanently monogamous, sexually and romantically exclusive between two people, cohabiting marriage, legally sanctioned if possible. In many cases, buying a house and having kids is also part of the goal. Partners are expected to remain together at the top of the escalator until death. Polyamory challenges this. The "are we exclusive" chat happens quite differently. You may live with and co-parent with more people. Your goal might not to be with a certain partner forever. This is countercultural, at least where I'm from, and probably where you're from too. And if I haven't already rubbed some people the wrong way, here's where it gets extra dicey.
I can't blame the man for being afraid.
Polyamory does not necessitate queerness, but some describe it as a queer practice. Wait, let me finish. I'm not saying that if you're monogamous and LGBT that you're some heteronormative, sellout, assimilist shill or whatever. There's straight people who practice polyamory. In fact, some aggressively straight people practice it. If someone who is cis-het says that they're queer simply because of polyamory, yeah, I can see why that rubs people the wrong way. You know what? Here's someone who made some very interesting points better than I could have.
A lot of the times, I feel like people justify ostracizing marginalized demographics just because they can. I think people don't view polyamorous people as marginalized, even though they are. In a similar way, I feel like aromantic, asexual people, intersex people are marginalized, but because we don't fit into a specific demographic, we're kind of othered. And I think polyamorous people are similar. At the same time, we are still marginalized because we go against the grain of like what's expected in society, and we're treated differently because of it. You know what I mean? And a lot of times there's overlap in these ostracized, marginalized groups with neurodivergency, queerness, fat phobia, disability, etc. And a lot of you guys use this othering as a way to justify your ableism, fat phobia, queer phobia, what have you. And so I wanted to hop on here because I'm seeing a lot of different people come on here and be like, hey, this is fucked up. And then people are like, well, of course you'd say that. You look exactly like the stereotype of polyamorous people. But I don't. And I'm still polyamorous. And I implore you to really sit with yourself and invoke why you feel the need to laugh amongst others and why you feel the need to put yourself in a superior complex and put others in an inferior complex, especially when it doesn't harm themselves or others. You know what I mean? Like, how does someone else's decision, lifestyle, and ability to love multiple people affect you? And why does it bother you enough to bully them? Genuinely.
So not all polyamorous folks are queer. There are some hetero poly people, okay? I would say, personally, that polyamory is not a sexual orientation, but a relationship orientation. But there is a reason that LGBT people historically have been more open to non-monogamy, or at least reported to be. Important historical context, because being gay was illegal in the US, gay people practice non-monogamy, at least in part due to not being free to legally embrace their partners and openly. That is a point that I need to acknowledge. However, there is something to be said about how people who are already challenging the societal norm in who they date and how they look may be more likely to challenge the societal norm of how they date, i.e., how many people. Queerness, in many ways, is about loving outside of the norm, and polyamory can run in parallel to that definition. Queerness and the ability to explore what type of relationships you want to have in the world, those two go hand in hand. You're exploring who you are in the universe, but you're also exploring how you relate to other beings in this universe. So it's no surprise that the conservative opposition to polyamory and or consensual non-monogamy is closely related to their aversion to queerness and deviant romantic and sexual behavior. Whether a poly person is queer or not, I think conservatives who look at it and go, ew, see it as the same thing. Also, I can't help but notice that the negative things people say about poly people mirror the things that people say about bisexuals.
Greedy, choose one.
I don't know though, because too much bisexual pride leads to this.
Verity Ritchie has a PhD in bisexual law, and in her video, Why We Hate Bi Women, it inspired the title of this video. There's also an equivalent on bisexual men.
In fact, the video is even more relevant than I remembered, because there's a whole chapter on non-monogamy and how it's associated with bisexuality. So yeah, just to be clear, what I'm about to say is massively like summarizing and condensing and narrowing in on just one aspect of the whole video.
She argues that people's aversion to bisexual women comes from the association with sex, sexual promiscuity. When a woman says she's bisexual, there's an instant association with multiple sexual partners, men and women. They become hypersexualized. I believe the same association happens when someone says that they are polyamorous, not just non-monogamous, because people forget that it isn't just about sex. Polyamory. To be clear, having lots of consensual sex is fine, but you know, society, shrug. I think you also find this among people who are hypersexualized in society. If your baseline sexuality is seen as too sexual, then you might find that you're more free to challenge some of the sex negative concepts the society hypersexualizing you throws back at you. If you're already on the margins and derided by society when you're harming no one, it gives you a better way of looking at other practices which aren't harming anyone. Hence,
what if I'm non-binary, bi and poly? Then what?
Life that you disagree with. It threatens them because having to question your life path requires thought, energy, and decision making. That's why conservatism isn't just a personal opposition to a different way of life, but political. Someone else living their life differently challenge me personally, but the fabric of society that is safe and familiar to me. You can say that this is due to fear or envy. You know, they're secretly jealous.
Oh fuck, I didn't even notice the battery hit yellow, but it is on red and beeping at me now, so we are quickly raiding out.
Trope that bigotry comes from
I wanted to send you to Vicryl, but they are already offline. Let's do...
The truth is that some people are just bigoted. Well, there are reasons for it, but not being gay, for example.
Yeah. Alright.
It's a cognitive bias that assumes that people get what they
I would do the spiel, but I don't know if my battery will make it. I love you all. Mwah. I'll see you tomorrow.
Homophobia won't be solved by simply...
Thank you for giving me the space.
And blaming gay people. And bigotry is just so much more...
Love you, bye!
And likewise, when people have seen poly people online being made fun of, some of the responses have been, oh, you're just jealous because you would want to try it. That might be true in some cases, but some people are just cruel, and that is much harder to work with and to rectify.